They laughed when Lena Carter, the janitor, whispered a language no expert could read. Phones came out, smirks spread, but what they didn't know was that every word she spoke was already written somewhere no one dared to look. And in just seconds, the room began to change, faces shifting, silence growing heavier. If this moment pulls you in, like, share and comment where you're watching from because some stories deserve to be seen. Sunlight flooded through the tall glass windows of Ashbury Museum in Charleston, casting pale gold across the marble floor like a quiet stage waiting for something to break its silence. Lena Carter, 42, a quiet black janitor with tired eyes and steady hands shaped by years of being overlooked, moved her cloth in slow circles across the glass display. She had learned long ago that silence kept her safe. Silence meant no questions, no trouble, no attention. It wasn't weakness, it was survival. The new artifact had arrived that morning, a stone tablet sealed behind polished glass. Lena didn't intend to look closely. She never did. Objects in this place belonged to people with degrees, not to someone like her. But something old and stubborn pulled her gaze back. The symbols carved into the stone were not just shapes. They felt familiar. Her breath slowed. A memory surfaced, soft as dust drifting through sunlight. Her grandmother's kitchen, the hum of an old refrigerator, a wrinkled hand tracing strange characters onto a napkin. Mama Inez, late 70s Sadas when she passed, a gentle woman with deep-set eyes and a quiet sadness, had never explained where she learned them. She only said, "Some words don't die, child. They just wait." Lena blinked, the present snapping back into place. "No," she whispered under her breath. "That can't be." Her fingers tightened around the cloth. She leaned closer, not touching, never touching, but close enough to follow the lines with her eyes. Her lips moved before she could stop them. A sound escaped. A word. Broken. Uncertain. But real. "Hey." The voice cut sharp through the air. Elias Reed, 58, head of security, broad-shouldered with a permanent crease between his brows from years of suspicion and control, stepped forward. He had built his identity on authority, on knowing who belonged and who didn't. And Lena, to him, had always been simple to categorize. "You talking to the rocks now?" he said, smirking. A couple of nearby researchers turned. One of them, a young intern, Daniel Price, 24, thin, nervous, eager to prove himself, paused mid-note, eyes flicking between Lena and the tablet. Lena straightened slightly, instinctively retreating inward. "That old reflex. Don't draw attention. Don't make it worse. I was just cleaning," Elias cut in. "That's what you're paid for." A few quiet laughs rippled. Not loud, not cruel enough to be called cruelty, but enough. Enough to remind her exactly where she stood. Someone lifted a phone, then another. Lena felt it, the shift. The invisible line where a moment becomes something else. A performance. Her chest tightened. She could stop now, walk away, pretend none of this happened. That would be easier. That would be safer. But the symbols were still there, calling. And something deeper, older than fear, refused to stay silent. "It's not just symbols," Lena said softly. Elias let out a short laugh. "Oh, here we go." But Lena didn't look at him this time. Her eyes stayed on the stone. "They repeat, but not randomly," she continued, voice trembling but steadying with each word. "This one," she tilted her head slightly, "it's not decorative. It marks a transition, like a clause." Daniel's pen stopped. "What did you say?" he asked, quieter now. Lena hesitated. Her pulse was loud in her ears. She swallowed. Then she read, a phrase, not perfect, not smooth, but deliberate. The room shifted. Daniel's face drained of color. "That," he stammered, stepping closer to the glass, "that matches the fragment we confirmed this morning." Silence fell, but not the comfortable kind. This was sharper, uneasy. Elias scoffed, louder now, trying to pull the moment back into something he could control. Coincidence? She probably overheard. "No," Daniel said, shaking his head. "No, that exact phrasing isn't public yet." Phones were still recording, now closer, hungrier. Lena felt the weight of it all pressing in the stares, the disbelief, the quiet calculations people made when they looked at her. She should stop, but she didn't. She leaned in just a fraction more. And read again. Another phrase. Longer this time. The silence deepened. Even Elias didn't laugh immediately, because something in the air had changed. Not belief, not yet, but doubt. And doubt, Lena realized, could be louder than laughter. By the time she stepped back, her hands were shaking. The phones didn't stop recording. They followed her, captured her, turned her into something consumable. A janitor who thought she could read what scholars couldn't. By noon, the video was everywhere. By afternoon, the comments came sharp, fast, merciless. And just as the sunlight began to tilt toward evening, casting longer shadows across the museum floor, a call came in. From Boston. From a professor who didn't laugh. By mid-morning, the sunlight that once felt gentle now seemed merciless, exposing everything Lena Carter wished she could hide. The video had spread faster than she could comprehend her face, her voice, her hesitation all replayed again and again across screens she would never see, judged by people she would never meet. Lena moved through the museum halls with her cart, the wheels squeaking softly against the polished floor, a rhythm she had always found comforting. Today, it sounded louder, accusing. Each step felt heavier, as if the building itself had begun to notice her. She kept her eyes down. That was her habit. That was how she survived. But survival felt different when people were watching. Two visitors paused near the exhibit entrance. A middle-aged couple, well-dressed, their voices hushed, but not enough. "That's her," the woman whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "The janitor," the man replied. "No way." Lena didn't stop walking. Didn't react. But inside, something tightened, not sharp like anger, but slow and familiar, like a bruise pressed too often. Inside the staff corridor, things weren't quieter. Elias Reed stood by the security desk, phone in hand, replaying the clip. A small group had gathered guards, a technician, even one of the interns. The laughter wasn't loud, but it carried. It always did. "Listen to this part," Elias said, rewinding. She really thought she cracked it. A few chuckles followed. Lena stepped past them, her face unreadable, her movements controlled. She had learned long ago how to separate her body from her thoughts, to let one move while the other stayed somewhere else entirely. "Morning, Lena," Elias added, not looking up. His tone was light, casual. That made it worse. She didn't answer. Further down the corridor, the atmosphere shifted. Dr. Helen Mercer, 51, head of antiquities, known for her precision and reputation built on years of academic discipline, stood with arms crossed near the exhibit room. Her posture was sharp, controlled, like someone who had spent a lifetime making sure nothing slipped out of place, including people. "You're early," she said without greeting. "I always am," Lena replied quietly. Dr. Mercer studied her for a moment, not with curiosity, but with calculation. "I reviewed the footage," she said. "You repeated a phrase that matches a known fragment. That doesn't mean you understand it." Lena nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." "Good," Mercer continued, "because speculation creates problems, and we don't need more of those today." There it was. Not anger, not cruelty, something colder. Dismissal dressed as professionalism. Lena turned to leave, but her gaze drifted back just for a second toward the glass case. The symbols were still there, waiting, and something inside her stirred again. Later, in a quiet corner near the maintenance closet, Lena sat on a low stool, her lunch untouched beside her. Instead, she traced shapes onto a scrap of paper with a dull pencil. One symbol, then another. Her hand hesitated, then continued. The patterns weren't random. They never had been. Her grandmother's voice echoed faintly in her memory, not in words this time, but in rhythm. The way she would pause between strokes. The way she would repeat certain shapes before moving on. It wasn't teaching. It was structure. Lena's breathing slowed as realization crept in, not sudden, not dramatic, but steady, like dawn unfolding. "These aren't just symbols," she murmured. "They connect." A shadow fell across the doorway. Daniel Price stood there again, notebook in hand, his usual nervous energy replaced with something sharper curiosity mixed with unease. "You're writing them," he said. Lena looked up, instinctively guarded. "Just remembering." Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "The sequence you read earlier, I checked the internal notes. That exact phrasing hasn't been shared outside the research team." Lena didn't respond. I don't think this is a coincidence, he added. Before she could answer, footsteps approached, quick, purposeful. A woman entered, holding a tablet, her expression tight. Dr. Mercer's office. Now. Her name badge read Clara Nguyen, 34, administrative coordinator, efficient and direct. Someone shaped by years of managing chaos without being seen as part of it. Lena stood slowly. Something was changing. She could feel it, not like hope, not yet, but like the ground shifting beneath something long buried. Inside Dr. Mercer's office, the air felt colder. Mercer stood by her desk, tablet in hand. She didn't sit, didn't offer a seat. We've received a call, she said. Lena's hands tightened slightly at her sides. From Boston. A pause. Professor Malik Bennett, Mercer continued, her voice measured. He claims the phrase you spoke belongs to a rare linguistic structure, one that hasn't been publicly reconstructed. Daniel, standing near the door, stiffened. Mercer's eyes locked onto Lena. He's requesting access to the artifact. And, she hesitated just briefly, to you. Silence filled the room. Not disbelief this time. Something else. Something closer to uncertainty. Mercer straightened slightly. We've agreed to let him come. Her tone hardened again, returning to familiar ground. Because if this is a misunderstanding, we'll resolve it quickly, and publicly. The word lingered. Publicly. Lena felt the weight of it settle on her chest. The same world that laughed at her would be watching again. By early afternoon, the museum no longer felt like a place of quiet preservation. It felt like something waiting to be exposed. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, unrelenting, leaving no corner untouched, as if even the walls had decided to stop keeping secrets. Lena Carter stood near the edge of Dr. Mercer's office, her hands folded tightly, her posture small but steady. Across from her, the door opened. Professor Malik Bennett stepped inside. He was 67, tall but slightly stooped, with silver hair that refused to lie flat and sharp eyes that carried the weight of decades spent chasing truths others overlooked. Years ago, his work had been dismissed as too unconventional, a rejection that had carved patience into his character, but also a quiet defiance. He no longer argued to be heard. He simply waited for the truth to make itself undeniable. His gaze moved across the room, not rushing, not judging until it landed on Lena, and stopped. Not curiosity, recognition. You're Lena Carter, he said. His voice wasn't surprised. It was certain. Lena nodded slowly, unsure why her heartbeat had suddenly grown louder. I heard the recording, Bennett continued, stepping closer. Not just the words, the rhythm. Dr. Mercer crossed her arms. We're here to verify accuracy, Professor, not impressions. Bennett didn't look at her. Not yet. Instead, he turned slightly toward Lena. Say it again, he said gently. Lena hesitated. The room felt too bright, too open. There was nowhere to hide now, not behind silence, not behind routine. But something in his tone wasn't asking her to prove anything. It was asking her to remember. She closed her eyes and spoke. The same phrase. This time, steadier. When she finished, the silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't disbelief. It was alignment. Bennett exhaled slowly. That's not reconstructed, he said quietly. That's lived. Dr. Mercer's expression tightened. Meaning? Bennett turned to her now, and the air shifted. Meaning she didn't guess, he said. She didn't approximate. She reproduced a phonetic structure that hasn't been formally documented in over 50 years. Daniel, standing near the back, swallowed hard. That's not possible, Mercer replied, her voice controlled but sharper now. Bennett reached into his worn leather briefcase and pulled out a thin folder, edges softened with age. I thought so too, he said. He opened it carefully, revealing aged papers, handwritten notes, symbols sketched in uneven ink, annotations in the margins. Lena's breath caught. She didn't recognize the paper, but she recognized the hand. The way certain strokes curved slightly longer than they should. The way repeated symbols leaned just a fraction to the right. Her grandmother. That can't be, Lena whispered. Bennett looked at her, softer now. Do you know the name Inez Delacroix? The room stilled. Lena's fingers trembled. That was my grandmother's name before she married. A pause settled over everything. Even the light seemed to hold its breath. Bennett nodded once. She worked unofficially with a linguistic survey group in the late 1970s, he said. Field documentation, trade dialect fragments, nothing she could ever publish under her own name. Dr. Mercer's jaw tightened. There's no official record of that. Exactly, Bennett replied. No official record. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. Lena felt something inside her shift, not sudden, not explosive, but deep, like something long buried had just exhaled. She taught me, Lena said quietly. Just little things. I thought it was just stories. Bennett shook his head gently. No, he said. She was preserving something she knew the world wasn't ready to credit her for. The words settled heavily into the room. And then, Bennett's eyes moved back to the tablet's image on Mercer's desk. This inscription, he continued, matches fragments from that same undocumented system. Dr. Mercer's posture shifted, almost imperceptibly. You're suggesting, I'm stating, Bennett interrupted calmly, that she recognized it because she inherited it. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was uncomfortable. Because it wasn't just Lena being seen differently now. It was everything else being questioned. Bennett turned fully toward Mercer. You've seen patterns in this before, he said. Not a question. A statement. Mercer didn't respond immediately. Daniel glanced between them, tension tightening his shoulders. I've reviewed multiple possibilities, Mercer said finally. Bennett's gaze didn't waver. And dismissed them, he replied. For lack of verifiable sources, Mercer snapped. Or for lack of acceptable sources? Bennett asked. The room went still again, because now the light wasn't just on the artifact. It was on her. Mercer's expression hardened. We operate on evidence, she said. Bennett lifted the folder slightly. This is evidence, he said. You just didn't want it to be. Lena stood frozen, caught between two worlds colliding, one that had never seen her and one that suddenly did. And for the first time, she understood something her grandmother had never said out loud. Some truths weren't lost. They were ignored. By late afternoon, the museum no longer belonged to quiet footsteps and whispered observations. It belonged to cameras, voices, and the restless weight of expectation. Sunlight still poured through the towering windows, but now it felt harsher, almost interrogative, as if even the day itself demanded answers. Rows of chairs had been arranged hastily in the central exhibition hall. Visitors lingered, reporters filled the edges, and museum staff stood stiffly along the walls. The stone tablet remained at the center, sealed in glass, no longer just an artifact but a question waiting to be resolved. Lena Carter stood a few steps away from it, hands at her sides, her posture still but not relaxed. She had never been in the center of anything before, not like this, not where every glance carried judgment, curiosity, or doubt. Her instinct told her to step back, to disappear, but there was nowhere left to go that wasn't already watching. Professor Malik Bennett stood beside her, composed, steady, his presence like an anchor in a room drifting toward tension. Across from them, Doctor. Helen Mercer maintained her professional stance, but the tightness in her shoulders betrayed something deeper, control slipping piece by piece. Near the press line stood Rachel Kim, 38, a senior cultural journalist known for dismantling public narratives with precise, unyielding questions. Years earlier, she had exposed a major museum scandal involving falsified artifact origins, an experience that made her distrust easy conclusions and sharpen her instinct for hidden truths. She watched Lena now with a gaze that wasn't mocking but measuring. Let's begin, Bennett said calmly. No microphone was needed. The room was already listening. Lena took a small step forward. The glass reflected her faintly, two versions of herself overlapping, the one she had always been, and the one everyone was trying to understand. Her heartbeat was loud, too loud. She closed her eyes. The noise faded, not because it disappeared, but because something else replaced it. A kitchen, warm light, the quiet scratch of pencil against paper, her grandmother's voice not instructing, not correcting, just present. Some words wait. Lena inhaled slowly. Then she began. The sounds came carefully at first, shaped by memory more than confidence. But as she continued, something shifted. The hesitation softened. The rhythm returned, not perfect, but familiar. Alive. Across the room, Bennett followed, translating line by line, his voice steady, grounded in certainty. "This is not funerary text," he said after a moment, glancing at the projected transcription. "It's a declaration, a binding statement." The audience quieted further. "An oath," he continued, "regarding the preservation of knowledge. It states that knowledge is not owned by rulers, but entrusted to those who carry it forward." A ripple moved through the room, not disbelief, but realization. Daniel Price stood near the back, his notebook forgotten in his hands. His earlier doubt had given way to something quieter. Respect, perhaps, or recognition that he was witnessing something that would outlast his own small place in it. Lena continued reading. Each phrase unfolded with greater clarity now, the structure revealing itself like something that had always been there, waiting for someone to notice. Then, a voice cut through. "That proves nothing." Elias Reed stepped forward, his expression sharper than before. The laughter from earlier was gone, replaced by something more defensive. "She could have memorized it," he said. "He could have coached her." He gestured toward Bennett. "This whole thing could be staged." The room tensed. Rachel Kim tilted her head slightly, watching closely now, her pen poised but unmoving. Bennett didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached into his briefcase again. The same folder. He placed a worn sheet of paper onto the nearby table, flattening it carefully. "These notes," he said, "were documented over 40 years ago." He looked directly at Elias. "Before Lena Carter was even born." The paper was projected onto a screen. The symbols, imperfect, handwritten, matched the structure Lena had just spoken. Not identical, but unmistakably connected. Rachel stepped forward slightly. "And the source?" she asked. Bennett didn't hesitate. "Ine de la Croix," he said. The name hung in the air. Lena felt it before she fully understood it, not as sound, but as weight. Rachel's expression shifted, recognition flickering behind her eyes. "I've seen that name in archived field notes," she said quietly, uncredited. Bennett nodded once. "Exactly." The silence that followed was no longer uncertain. It was undeniable. Elias stepped back, his certainty unraveling in the face of something he couldn't dismiss as easily as before. Dr. Mercer said nothing, because there was nothing left to say that wouldn't confirm what had already been exposed. The light in the room hadn't changed, but what it revealed had. And for the first time since the video had surfaced, no one was laughing. By the time the afternoon light softened into gold, the museum no longer felt like a place of judgment. It felt like something that had been forced to look at itself. The same sunlight that had exposed Lena earlier now moved gently across the floor, stretching long shadows that no longer hid anything, but revealed everything in quieter truth. The room remained full, but the energy had shifted. Where there had once been whispers and restrained laughter, there was now silence, thick, reflective, almost reverent. Lena Carter stood where she had been all along, but the space around her felt different. Not because she had moved, but because everyone else had. Professor Malik Bennett spoke first, his voice steady, carrying without effort. "The translation is accurate," he said. "Phonetically, structurally, historically. There is no reasonable doubt." The words landed without resistance, because by now, there was nothing left to argue. Rachel Kim lowered her pen slowly, her earlier skepticism replaced by something more careful respect earned, not assumed. Daniel stood straighter, as if trying to realign himself with what he had just witnessed. Even Elias Reed, once so certain of his position, remained silent, his posture no longer rigid but uncertain, like a man who had misplaced something he thought he owned. Dr. Helen Mercer stepped forward. For a moment, she said nothing, and in that silence, something more significant than any statement began to take shape. The effort it took for someone like her to stand in a place where she was no longer the most certain voice in the room. "I was incorrect," she said finally. The words were measured, controlled, but they did not tremble. They didn't need to. "I evaluated the situation based on incomplete assumptions," she continued, "and I failed to recognize the validity of what was in front of me." She turned slightly toward Lena. "That failure is mine. It wasn't warmth. It wasn't humility. Not fully, but it was something real. And in this room, that was enough." The museum director stepped in next. Charles Whitaker, 63, a man who had spent most of his career protecting the institution's reputation above all else, adjusted his tie as he spoke. Years earlier, a public scandal involving misattributed artifacts had nearly cost him his position, shaping his instinct to control narratives before they could spiral. "We will be issuing a formal statement," he said, "acknowledging the error made today and the role Miss Carter has played in correcting it." The phrasing was careful, institutional, but it carried weight, because it would be seen, because it would be recorded, because it would remain. Someone in the crowd began to clap, not loudly, not immediately contagious, but it spread, slowly, unevenly, until the room filled with it. Lena didn't move. She didn't know how to respond to applause meant for her. Not because she didn't understand it, but because it had never been part of her world. Professor Bennett stepped closer to her, placing the folder gently into her hands. "These belong to you," he said. The paper felt fragile, older than memory. Lena opened it carefully. The same handwriting, the same careful strokes she had seen only in fragments of memory, now real, preserved, undeniable. And inside, folded between the pages, a single sheet, a letter. Her fingers hesitated before unfolding it. The words were faded but steady. "If you are reading this, then you remembered." Lena's breath caught. Not everything is meant to be proven. Some things are meant to be carried. Her vision blurred slightly, but she continued. "They may not see it right away. That's not your burden. Your burden is to keep it alive." The room around her faded again, not into memory this time, but into something quieter. Understanding. She lowered the letter slowly. For years, she had believed what she knew didn't matter, that it was small, that it belonged nowhere. But it had never been small. It had just been unseen. When she looked up again, the room had changed. Not physically, but in the way people held themselves, in the way they looked at her, not past her, not through her, but at her. Not as a question, as an answer. The sunlight stretched further across the marble floor, warming the edges of the glass case. And for the first time, Lena Carter did not feel like she was standing outside of history. She felt like she had stepped into it. There are miracles that don't arrive with thunder or flashing light, but come quietly when someone is finally seen for who they truly are. Lena's story isn't just about decoding an ancient language. It's a reminder that God doesn't place gifts randomly. He plants them in the most unexpected places. In a janitor, in someone overlooked, maybe even in you on the days you feel invisible. The miracle wasn't that Lena could read the inscription. The miracle was that, in a room full of doubt, someone chose to believe. And sometimes that's how God works. Not through noise or spectacle, but through one heart brave enough to see what others ignore. In everyday life, maybe you've been underestimated, or worse, passed by like you didn't matter. But remember this, what God placed inside you does not need the world's permission to be valuable. It only needs the right moment and a faith that refuses to fade. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth. Leave a comment. Have you ever been underestimated? And how did you rise above it? And if you believe stories like this matter, subscribe to the channel because here, we tell the stories the world almost missed. May God bless you on your strongest days, and especially on the days you feel like giving up. Because sometimes, the greatest miracle isn't being chosen. It's finally being seen.
If this touched you, say something in the comment. Tell us where you're from and follow Hidden Black Tail for more real story.